everybody. Thanks for joining our Lunch and Learn session today. Today I have Mr. L here with me. And by the way, I'm Jackson Felden, the moderator for today. Today's session is all about Azure Biceps. Hopefully, everybody will walk away with a good understanding of this Azure technology. Mr. L, if you want to give a quick intro about yourself, and then I will share the code and we can get things moving forward.
Sure. Thank you for introduction, Jackson. It's lovely to be here and being guest in for the Cloud Lunch and Learn, presenting. Probably, I presented before, but this is a special topic which I have a more excitement to present today to everybody. It's about Azure Bicep, which is a new language. It's a new Azure provisioning tool that we are going to discuss, and we are going to try to discuss in a way that if you have professionals who already know Azure ARM templates, which is prior way how you were supposed to do the Azure native resource provisioning, they would understand the differences, where to use Azure Bicep, and what are the benefits. Yeah. And we'll have a bunch of demos that will go. And about myself, I'm Elhan Yusupov. I forgot that part. Always I do. So I'm Microsoft certified trainer for a couple of years. There will be another slide about that, how to connect with me. But I'm looking forward to connect with each of you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Guys, before I start, I just will give you 1 or 2 minutes for you to scan the code. There is a small registration, and then for us, it's always good, for Microsoft, who is our sponsor, it's always good to keep track of who is joining our sessions. And please remember as well, scanning the code or going to the link, you can get some additional resources after the presentation, just to keep your learning moving forward. And but please do it now. I will paste at the end of the presentation as well. But if you could do it now, we can have everything sorted. Okay, do that, please. Just scan the code. And there is a small registration, just your name, your email address, very simple. And then from there, you can jump into getting some additional resources available from Microsoft as well. When you are registering, at the end, I will give you the link as well. Anybody joining our session, our live session, will be able to get exam voucher as well. I know probably at this stage, Microsoft certification is very important for your company, for yourself as a person as well. And we are delighted Microsoft is sponsoring some vouchers as well. I will give the link at the end of the presentation as well. Please make sure you stay tuned.
That's awesome. Getting some free exam vouchers. So, and pumping your CV and getting more certs. That's definitely great. Opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's one less thing to be worried in paying the exam.
Sure. So less stress, right? You don't pay for exams, so you'll be more relaxed to take exam. Yeah.
Okay, I think now we are ready to go. And let me just add your screen in here, and then I would say, yeah, that's fine. I can see your screen here already. And okay, guys, that's pretty much it for me for now, I would say. Enjoy the session. Hopefully you will learn a lot. I will be here on the background. If you have any questions during the session, please make sure you add your comments, add your questions as well. And then time by time, we can have a small break and to tackle the questions. Otherwise, at the end, I believe we have a bit of time as well to just wrap up and make sure everything's fine. Okay, thanks very much, and stay tuned at the end of up to the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Jackson. So let me take it from here. Again, thank you everyone for joining to Cloud and Lunch and Learn session today. We are, as we already said, we are going to speak about transforming ARM Json, how we can transform these ARM Json templates into Azure Bicep, and how we can just get started with Azure Bicep from the small steps up to the more complex deployments that you may want to do. So before starting, thank you Cloud Lunch and Learn for organizing this. Thank you our mentor. Thank you for the moderator Jackson doing this, and for everyone who is joining. Thank you everyone for giving your time. I hope you will learn a number of things that are going to be useful for you. So that said, let's move forward here. So this is a little bit information about myself. I'm not going to repeat myself. I'll just point you to my latest to the latest, if you want to get some latest information about Azure Bicep innovations, what's going on with Azure Bicep team, check out my blog post, and as well as I will give you a link to the Azure Bicep team page where you can check there as well. You see the Twitter account, follow me, tweet about this. I'll be happy to follow you as well and get connected with me on a LinkedIn profile. Uh, that said, let's move forward. And this is basically what you see is the infographic that describes the company profile, T-Rex Solutions, where I'm actually employed. This is a mid-sized company, and we are a very good place to grow your career and do interesting work. And our company mainly specialized on serving government and federal civilian agencies, with U.S. Census Bureau being the largest. And we did a number of mission critical deliveries there, and we are very proud to have success in this project. And that said, feel free to reach out to me if you are on the market, and if you have any questions or you want to join our team, please, let me know. All right, so this is the main part of our demonstration today. So what we will cover in this session. First, of course, we will start with what is Azure Bicep, right? Without knowing that, there is no point to move forward. We need to make clear identification, what it represents, what type of language it is. Then once we know what it is, then we'll look into the inner details. Why Bicep language? What type of new things you can do with that? What are the benefits of learning Azure Bicep? After that, we'll have this how to get started with Azure Bicep. What are the productivity tools? Where you need to look? We'll consider that one. Then we'll look into the Azure Bicep language concepts. No, within that Azure Bicep language, what type of how to make conditionals, how to write your, how to introduce your parameters, how variables work, what are the functions and stuff like that. Then finally, of course, we'll have a number of demos, starting with the simple ones, and then building on top of that based on Azure Git repo that I created for this for learning the Azure Bicep. And I will share that GitHub repo so you can actually follow up and do all the demos which are there, which you have like around 8 to 9 demos where you learn by doing, which I believe always fun. Now, what we are not going to cover is that how to build CI/CD pipeline. Let's using like for example GitHub Actions. I'm not going to cover that in this session, but if you would like to look at some samples, I will gladly point you to my Azure repo where that work is already done, so you can actually reference that while building your own CI/CD pipeline for Azure Bicep deployments. We are not going to look into third-party support or integration-related topics at this time. Next, what is Azure Bicep, right? So we come to the main part, and as you see on the screen, Azure Bicep is a new DSL language, which stands for domain-specific language for provisioning Azure resources. What it means that at the current moment, the purpose of Azure Bicep is to make sure that it's easy, it's clean, it is fun to provision Azure resources using the Bicep language. So that's the purpose. So and if that's what you are trying to do, it's a perfect tool for that. Next, as you may see, the purpose again of Azure Bicep is to simplify the authoring experience with a cleaner syntax and more code reuse. And we'll look into those concepts where this code reuse come very handy. And this new language aims to make it easier to write down infrastructure as code for developers and for DevOps engineers that typically create those things using ARM templates. Uh, and they do provision that in order to maintain their Azure infrastructure. So I'm just going to point out here that Azure Bicep is actually a transparent abstraction over ARM and ARM templates. And we are going to look into that on a graphic that's going to come next. And whenever you have Azure Bicep, you can always transpile that. you can basically convert that into ARM templates and have this as a ARM template JSON file output. So let's look at that notion that what does it mean to have, what does it mean that Azure Bicep is a transparent abstraction over ARM and ARM templates? For those who don't know, and probably most of you do know, because this is probably not the first session you attended about Azure deployments, there's a layer called Azure Resource Manager, which does the authentication, and as well as it's a set of API layer that stands between the client applications and the Azure environment. And here, as you see, the ARM, which is Azure Resource Manager, get basically it get calls from Azure portal. It can also work with some other Azure SDKs, software development kits. And what's the Bicep language stands on top of ARM templates, meaning that whatever you can do in ARM templates, you can also do on this Azure Bicep language. And Azure Bicep language again simplifies structure, and it's not using JSON file related templates. So what it used then? Let's look at that. So why Bicep language, right? So uh, so we say that it has a number of things that ARM templates are also have. But next thing I wanna kind of focus here is that why we need to switch using and learning Azure Bicep if you already know ARM templates, right? That's the kind of very valid and good question to have. So I hope the following 10 reasons that I'm going to display in few seconds on the screen here will convince you to go and at least consider Azure Bicep for your next Azure deployment tasks. And as you may see here on the right side, we have a screenshot, right? It's from Visual Studio Code. And what you see here is basically, on the left side here, I have a bicep code. Let me make sure it's actually done in a way that everything is, yeah, here it is. So here on the left side, we have a Azure Bicep code that shows the database provisioning for Azure DB. It's a document DB in terms of namespaces and APIs. And on the right side, we have the JSON ARM template representation of that. And when you compare that, you see that in terms of if you ever did any programming in your life and you want to define parameters and then define the resources, then you will see that this looks more familiar, like you would do the provisioning or writing on a kind of Terraform type of tools, or and what it is, it means that we use the code concepts here, not the JSON template representation, in order to put this, in order to define our resource on the left, but on the right side we are using the JSON representation, which is more cumbersome, and there's much more lines and much more spaces are taken out of it. But then you can do it more concise on the left side using the Azure Bicep. But that's not the only reason, right, to go forward with Azure Bicep. The first thing, of course, is to understand and maintain your Azure Bicep infrastructure. If you have more readable, more cleaner, and shorter representation of Azure resource, that's going to be just big win-win for your day-to-day tasks, and will save you a lot of a number of hours. You know, next is day zero support. It stands for the fact that because Azure Bicep is using the specs, it's using the Azure Biceps actually, as you already know, it's using the it's using the API specs of Azure as they are available online. So that's why whenever there's a new feature of Azure resource get updated, or there are another new resource introduced into the Azure ARM layer, then you would be able to access them right away. There would be no wait time in order to get that resource integrated, to get that resource or update integrate to the Azure Bicep. Zero wait time. Uh, Next, what we have is it's a transparent abstraction over ARM and ARM templates. Then it has awesome tooling in Visual Studio Code, and we are going to look into that Bicep extension that adds a number of good features starting from the version 0.4.6 that I blogged about on my the Cloud Marathoner blog post. So just have a look there, but I'm also going to touch and speak about them like linters, validations. They are really, really good, and they are just getting better from each release to next one. Next, we have this clean code syntax that we mentioned, code reusability and modularity, right? So on Bicep language, if you want to use the modules, there's already there's a possibility to do that, and it's very easy to use. You can have the modularity on Azure ARM templates as well, right? Because there's a concept of linked templates that you can use, and that's kind of alternative to the modules that you have on Azure Bicep. But they are different way. You need to handle them in a bit different way that you would do with Azure Bicep modules. Then Azure Bicep language has this deep integration with Azure because of this day zero support and because of native support that Azure provides. Pre-flight validations. This is another great thing where you can make sure that before you want to push your scripts to provision the resources based on your Bicep language code, you can ask the Azure saying, okay, if I'm deploying this, what would be the changes, how they would look like? And I'm going to run multiple commands where we'll look into those pre-flight validation checks, how they look like, and what's the benefit there.
Yeah, there are two questions. I think it's a good
Mhm.
time for me to,
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
just to let you know. The first one is if Bicep language is a native product of Azure.
Yes, Bicep language is developed by Azure Bicep team, which is a native to Azure, correct?
Okay, that's sorted.
Mhm.
Yeah, the next one is does Visual Code support Bicep?
Yes, Visual Studio Code supports the Bicep, but Visual Studio Code supports it. It has extension, so there's a support, and I will show it. Yes.
Okay, and one more here, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Let me just publish in here. Yeah, why Bicep over Terraform?
Yes, so that's really good one. In Terraform, you have to maintain the state. You see, there's the state management, but that thing doesn't. It's not needed for Azure Bicep. That's like one difference. Another difference is that there's a day zero support with Azure Bicep, meaning that with Terraform you would have to get updates in order to deal with, in order to be able to use new features or get the bug fixes or stuff like that. But with Azure Bicep, you don't need to wait for that. And plus, another difference is that again, with Terraform, yes, you can provision your Azure resource. You can provision your cloud resources in not just Azure, but you can use, for example, other cloud providers. But the purpose of Azure Bicep at the moment is to make sure that you can do the Azure provisioning right, easy, and fun.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for that. Great interaction from the audience. One more here.
Yes.
Let me see. Yeah, does Bicep offer change tracking like Terraform?
So in Bicep, the change tracking thing you can do using the pre-flight validations. Before deploying your new templates, it will tell you which resources are going to have updates, which resources are going to be created. So you can track it that way, if that's the answer to your question.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, no more questions at the moment. Yeah, let's keep moving.
All right, let's keep the roll moving here. All right, so as we said, there's no state management, and finally production support. Right, that's very important. If you are rolling something into production, you want to make sure that if something goes unexpectedly wrong, you can rely on regular Microsoft support, which is actually provided by starting from the Bicep version 0.3, can get that official support from Microsoft, and that's a peace of mind, right? Nobody wants to get stranded because of some bug or issue, and being able to resolve on its own. If you have official support, that's always handy. All right, that's it. Let's move to the next one, which is the installation and how I can run this Azure Bicep. So basically, depending where you run it and how you want to run it, it's a cross-platform. You can run it on a Linux, on Mac OS, and of course on Windows. And you can use Azure. You can use either your Azure CLI skills or your PowerShell skills. With PowerShell skills, it's better to utilize your PowerShell core, which is cross-platform, starting from the PowerShell version 7.1. But if you want like specificity, I would just say that for Azure CLI, you need to make sure that you have a version 2.20.0 or above in order to be able to use the Bicep with that tool. With PowerShell, it needs to be a version 5.6 or above. Okay, so keep that in mind, and you'll get that information if you just search on it. Just be aware about that. Next is Bicep language concepts. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'll just list them as you see. And as you see, they are all regular kind of concepts that you have in most languages, in most programming languages, and uh, as well as on the script languages. So one distinction I want to make sure is that everybody actually got it right. Azure Bicep language is not intended to build applications. Okay, you can't just go, let's say, and build a web app using the Azure Bicep language. The main idea of Azure Bicep language is how you can define, maintain, and interact with your Azure resources. How you define them in the environment, and you make it easy and kind of clean code in order to interact and maintain that in long run. Okay, let's make sure that everybody got it right. Azure Bicep is not intended to create a web app, or is not intended to create a web application and run that web application, but it is intended to define your web application as an Azure resource and then being able to deploy and maintain that. All right. Okay, that said, let's move forward here. And instead of giving definition of each concept, I want to rather kind of focus on the quick look into Bicep concepts, and those concepts that we were listed. But before doing that, is there any questions, Jackson? If there is any, please let me know.
Yeah, actually, there is another one.
Okay.
Yeah, I know everybody using Azure is
Yes,
always conscious about prices and
of
cost
course.
and so on. Yeah, the question here is: do we need any separate license for Bicep, or is kind of part of the Azure already?
That's awesome question, actually. Thank you for question. No, you don't need any license to run the Azure Bicep. It's actually open source project, and it is maintained by Azure Bicep team on GitHub. So you are going to get the URL at the end of session. It's going to be QCR code. No, it is free to use. For any resource, of course, you deploy to your Azure environment whenever those resources are running and active. Then whatever the regular pricing is, you just pay for that. That's it.
Okay, but there is no extra,
No, there is
let's
no
say, extra
extra.
price by using the Bicep.
No extra
Okay, yeah,
price.
that's good
Yeah.
news. Yeah. Mhm.
All right. Sure. Great. All right. Let's move here. Next is I say that we are going to consider this Bicep concepts, right? And first of them is more important, and one of the important is the parameterization, right? So when you use parameterization, there are like different types of parameters you can introduce. One of them, of course, is string, and you can have these extra validations, like in terms of defining the lengths, or if you have any special expression, you can define it. Then you can have this list of allowed values that you can introduce, so that whenever administrator or the person who's provisioning the Azure Bicep uh, language code, they can pick one of the proper ones. For example, if you are speaking about the standard storage account in Azure, they can come with different redundancies, and one of them is a locally redundant service. That's you see the first one, and another one is like zone redundant storage, right? So that's kind of if you want to go with it. But there is of course a premium and other ones, and if you don't want to include them because there's higher cost and there is no business justification to use them, then that's how you can kind of limit that. Next concept we have is template functions and variables. So in terms of functions, as you may see here, we have a resource group function, right? And then we have another representation here on the top. So the first one is actually this resource group function is available, or if you even use your ARM templates, they are going to be there. So whichever functions you have in your ARM template deployments going to be as good working on your Bicep language as well. And the one that you see here, the string interpolation, that's basically to if you want to define your naming of your properties or resources in a way that's it's more dynamic, that's utilizing certain kind of environment name, for example, can be a good way that you can interpolate the names of your resources where you define your environment name, or let's say Azure region where that resource is getting deployed. All right, and that said, of course, the one of the biggest things that everybody needs to be aware while they're crafting their Azure Bicep code is the modules. And when you look into the modules, as you see here, so the beauty of modules is that whenever you define it, you can define, of course, within the module, like resource groups, and then if each resource group that you define needs to have multiple of Azure resource included into that, you can easily define the module. But in addition to that, the biggest thing here is that you can reference existing um, Bicep files using the modules. Okay, so for example, in this, what you see on the screen is that there's a virtual machine that's actually referenced. And here in parameters, what we have here that like, as you see, we have three parameters here. These are the three parameters that are required parameters in order to be able to provision this specific resource. That's why you need to include them so that your Azure Bicep language doesn't complain and there is no validation errors. Okay. All right. That said, uh, I'm going to move to the demos. Before moving to the demos, is there any questions in the studio, Jackson? How things are going on your end? Everything is fine, I hope. All right, if there's nothing coming up, it means everything is good. I'm going to mute my camera just to make sure that there is enough bandwidth for a good experience of the demos. And I'm going to bring my Visual Studio Code. All right. So here we go. Now I'm going to bring the Visual Studio Code. And I hope everybody is able to see that nicely and cleanly. Let's make it a little bit bigger here. Wherever possible, I'm going to increase the fonts. But this is basically what you see here is the Visual Studio, of course. And I want to start with the extension that I told about. It's this extension when you click on the extensions button here, you would see that, and you go, of course, type the name Bicep. Right, we did that. And you want to make sure that your Bicep extensions is installed. It has many features and that are making your uh, that will make your Azure Bicep coding very pleasant, and you will use the validation that are built in. There's IntelliSense, there's a linting. There are many other kind of life-saving, I would say, features that are really awesome, and they will speed up your Azure Bicep language understanding and coding. Okay, so let's make sure that you always check this and make sure that it's installed. So once this is there, next thing I want to show is that where you can find this, right? There will be a link. So this is the my repo. It's a public repo where I have this code and everything there. So you would see that there are samples here. There's like 8 demos here. In addition to that, you have parameter files, you have scripts. For example, if you go to scripts, you would see how you can use your Azure CLI in order to deploy each of those things. So you can I'm referencing this one so that you know where to look. In addition to that, if you wanted, let's say, to put some CI/CD behind the scene using the GitHub Actions, then you can look into this uh, Bicep test, which I provisioned a couple months ago. You can use this project. In this project, if you go to the actions, you will see that it has actually GitHub Actions that are taking the code from it's basically taking the code as it is deployed as a Bicep, and then make a build and then provision that into the subscription where you give an access. Only the thing here I want to mention is that read this README file, because you need to make certain uh, configurations in terms of, which resource group, which subscription you want to give an access. And this is all done using the security recommendations of GitHub. Okay, so you need to set them up. Just be aware about that. Okay, let me go back to the main Bicep repository. That's going to be the, so this is the learn Bicep, so you can get it and make it work. All right, I'm switching back now to the Azure, to our Visual Studio Code. And the first demo that we are going to do, let me show it again, is going to about storage account and parameterization. All right, then we'll jump into other demos. So in terms of storage account, if you remember, I'm going to open a regular environment, Azure environment, that you have. And here, for example, let's look into these logs. Okay, here, as you see, guys, I have a storage account here. Okay, and this storage account is a regular storage account, nothing special. Only the thing I would like to show you is that here under automation, you have this export template. So this export template basically is going to take that storage account and show the JSON, ARM JSON template representation of it. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. And as you may see, it's populating on the right side, saying they are generating this really awesome feature that you can utilize on your day-to-day Azure, your day-to-day Azure skills. You can also download it, or you can visualize that. That's really good. So it's taken a little bit longer than usual. I never see that going so long. Here we go. So we have it here. So if you go and basically select all this schema and then bring it back to your Azure, into your Visual Studio Code, you will see that it's going to look something like that. All right. So this is your basically representation of all the resources within that storage account. Okay, within that Cloud Shell account that I just showed you. And the purpose here is that what we see is it has variables, right? There's nothing defined. It has resources under it, which is the storage account resource and all the other related kind of storage account configuration here. And we have a storage name here, correct? That's what we have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open another storage bicep and I'm going to compare them. Okay, let's open this one and then this guy here. Okay, all right. All right, so what we are going to do now, let me remove this. We are going to compare these two things, okay? So I'm going to make sure that our JSON representation is actually on the right side, okay? And then on the other side, we have the Visual Studio, we have the Bicep language. So as you may see here, we have what? We have parameter, right? We have resources, and what we have on the left side is actually, we also have this storage name parameter. As you see, we have a location which takes the current location of the resource group. And it assumes that, whenever you deploy the storage account, it deploys under the resource group, which is the usual case that you would do. And then it has this representation, which is different than what you have on that you have on your storage account resource. So if I put them side by side, you would see that, for example, here there are a lot of similarities. And one of the similarities that I want to kind of pinpoint for everyone is, so let me, so here, as you see, this is the basically, resource type. As you see, it's a Microsoft storage account, and same resource type actually exists on the right side here. And then you have API versioning. So these API versionings are also matching, but it doesn't mean that it's going to match every time. For example, here, when you provision using the Azure autocomplete, let's say you don't want to use the latest API version, but you have to use the one that's prior to that. So then, for example, here, if you go back and press on Control Tab, you would see that there are other versions you can use of this API. Let's say, you can choose one prior version. And if there is, for example, you type it, let's say we made a typo here and we type here 0, for example, 20 instead of that, you would see it will give you these squiggly lines, meaning that, hey, whatever you type, we are not able to find it. This is the awesome IntelliSense that Visual Studio Code Bicep extension makes sure that whenever you do something and you see these squiggly lines, this is the warning, making sure that something is not right, but it doesn't prevent you from actually, uh, from not adding this. So red one means that, something is definitely wrong and it's not going to compile. All right, let's choose that one again. We talked about location. Here in our case is the US. Then you have tags. Okay, so as you see, tags are defined similarly. They are all about single quotes on the bicep part, but you have to use double quotes on the anything that you do, like string on the JSON ARM template. Okay, and that's pretty much it. This is the most important parts you need to know. But let me do the following. Okay, we didn't just come here to compare it. Let's make a first deployment and see how this IntelliSense can help us to provision a new resource using the Visual Studio Code. And to do that, we are going to do the following. We are going to use the snippets. Let me make it bigger here a little bit. All right, I hope it's much better and visible for everyone. So for the snippets here, I'm going to, there's such a thing, if you type res, you would see that there's a drop line. There's a nice drop down, and if you say res storage, this is the snippet that has been added recently, where if I just click tab on it, just click on it, it will basically bring another storage account that where I just need to fill the names. For example, I would say it's a next storage. Let's give it a name, next storage. And then we say, okay, this is going to use not the prior one, but it's going to use the latest API version, which is the one on top. And then here we have equals. After we define the resource, its type, and API, now we need to define its properties, because the storage account, there's a special restrictions how the storage name needs to be defined. It needs to be all lower cases and digits up to 24 characters. So let's say it's a CLL session, and we'll throw some numbers there to make sure it's unique. Then you see it's actually Azure Bicep language gives you the best practices. They are implementing best practice, meaning that whenever you try to provision a single resource, make sure that they are provisioned in the same resource group. But this is a best practice. It's not something that you are forced to do. If you want, for example, to define that in a different region, then you need just to define, for example, if you want that to be West US, you can also do that one as well. But again, the best practice is to make sure that you have the resource group function that takes the resource group wherever it's going to be deployed, and a location which is going to be the Azure region. Okay, then the kind is defined as storage v2 premium. So if you don't want to have a premium, another neat feature is that for certain resources they have this nice selection where you can choose the redundancy for your storage. For example, in our case, we know that premium is going to be a bit expensive, and we are going to use this for test dev purposes. That's why standard local redundant storage is the cheapest, and it's good for these purposes. So you can choose that one. And oops, let me put the tab here, and that's it. So our resource is already defined here by few clicks. You're able to go and define. If you want to add tags in the same manner, you can go, and if you, for example, Control Tab. If you click on Control and please on Tab on your Windows machine or whatever the Mac or Linux OS requires, then you would see that you have actually here some properties. You can put that. You can define some additional properties. You can also define tags, as you see here. If you define the tags, we can do it here, and we can say, okay, this is the let's say project name. You can say project is, and you can put the name here, CLL demo. So this tag we just added. So in terms of provisioning that, right? So it's good that we put this storage account. It has actually two storage accounts with different names. So how we would provision that, right? It's all good, but what's the way to provision? So if you want to provision that, I created this under the scripts, nice set of scripts. If you never use that one, this is the place where you need to start with the login into your Azure environment. You would just follow the steps, and once you run everything successfully, it would mean that if you go here and run this last one, you should be able to see the name of your Azure subscription. In my case, it's primary MCT Azure. That's why it's all good. All right. So because let me because it's there, the next thing that we are going to do is we'll take this storage bicep, right, where we have two resource groups, right? We have two storage accounts that we need to provision on a resource group. In order to do that, before doing that, there's a neat feature on bicep extension that you can see here on top. All right, so this is called bicep visualizer. So if you click on that, you would see that it's actually visualized for us what type of resources are defined within this Azure Bicep language code. So it says that, hey, you are going to get two storage accounts. The storage account resource names are storage account and next storage. That's what we see here, correct? So any questions till this point on the demo before we kick off the provisioning? Or we are good? All right, sounds like everything is fine. So let's kick off the provisioning then, right? So in order to provision this, again, from the file here, what you need to do, we need first to create the resource group, and then we need to deploy that. And this is the basically example that we can use. In our case, we are going to say, okay, AZ group, which stands for AZ CLI, and then we say create. So as a location, we can say it's going to be East US, or it can be East US 2, or any other location that's close to you. And the resource group name will say it's the resource group, Cloud Launch and Learn, demo session. Okay. And then we are going to press on enter. So what's going to happen is that this command should create a new resource group called CLL demo session in our Azure. And if you want to check that without leaving your terminal, you can just type AZ group and then you type list. If you do this, what you would get is actually a bunch of JSON representation, which is not readable. So let's make it more readable by adding output. -O stands for output, and we type table here. And voila, what we have is much nicer look. And we see that our resource group that we just wanted to create is provisioned here, right? It's ready for us. So once this is there and we validate that, next what we are going to do, we are going to run the deployment for our storage bicep, right? So to run that, we are going to type AZ deployment. Okay, and then we'll type AZ deployment group, because that's the group deployment. Next, we'll do subscription level deployment just to have it. And then we want to create something, right? So we want to create a, we want to deploy that storage bicep. In order to deploy that, we need to put the same resource group name that we created. And that resource group name was what? I hope that was the same, but we can actually look into we can go back to our Azure. This is the Azure environment. And I can see that the one that we just provisioned is actually this one, resource group demo session. As you see, it's empty. There is no resource here, correct? So what we are going to do now, we are going to say, okay, to that resource group that you just saw, let's go, oops, let me do it again. Let's go and provision a resource from file. -f stands for file here. And then we put the basically modules and then storage. That's the name of the storage.bicep. Okay, so what we did here, let me make it a little bit bigger. So I went first, type this AZ deployment group create module storage bicep. But before deploying this, let me actually CLS. Before deploying this, okay, did we do it? Nope. So before deploying this file, we want to make sure that we can run some type of validation, right? Modules storage. Okay, so this module storage is the one we were looking into. Here, as you see, this is the file that has these two storage accounts, right? That's what it is. And here what we are saying, okay, go and create that. But before creation, we want to run pre-flight validation. There was a question about how we can compare if there are differences. So let's do that. So -c here at the end actually defines that condition. Like check the pre-flight condition to see what will happen if you will take this Azure Bicep storage. If you take this Azure Bicep storage deployment file and run it, what will happen? So if you make it, full screen here, as you see, it says it's actually figuring out what's going to happen now. It's a pre-flight validation, and we get this back, right? So this is the where you compare it and say, okay, it says there will be two creations. It's going to create this first storage account with the name that's displayed here. And as you see, it has a different API version than the one which is below that. And they have both different storage accounts. And then it's asked me here at the bottom, do I want to proceed or not? It will say two resources are going to be created. Do you want to proceed or not? So I would say yes. Let's go ahead with that. And now actual creation is actually kicked off. And when this thing is running, I'm going to switch to the Azure resource here, the same resource group, and click on this refresh. And when I click on refresh, we don't see anything here. But if I go to the deployments tab here, you see that it says deploying. So it's deploying, and deployment name go as a storage here at the moment, but this is still blue. Oh, it says succeeded. If I go back to overview and then I refresh this, it will take some time. Sometimes it doesn't come up right away. But here we go. We see that two storage accounts have been deployed, right, as it's supposed to be happening. And here we get the success message. Basically, we get this JSON output saying that it succeeded. All right. So let me, so this was a sample deployment on a resource group, right? Where we had these two storage accounts and we just went and deployed that. Now let's look at the scenario where you want to deploy more than one, okay? You want to deploy, let's say, module where you are going to utilize this storage with some type of parameterization. So to do that, we are going to dive into these samples and look into the this is the second one, actual second demo, where we are going to use in the second demo, we are going to use to deploy the Azure Web App and virtual machine at the same time. So to do that, what you need to do is go to that repo and click on this number 7 deployment. You see it's different. It's starting target scope from subscriptions. And what is the target scope is where you want to deploy these resources. So as you may see, there are 4 different scopes. In our case, when you don't define it by default, Azure Bicep would assume you are doing it on the resource group. If you define it like subscription or any other, then scope is going to change. And as you may see here, I defined parameters. We used the string interpolation here. We made sure that our passwords are secure strings, meaning there is no password check-in into our repository. And of course, we defined a resource group with the name that's here. And plus, we have application service That's referencing this module from app services.bicep in modules, correct? So let's do that. Look at it quickly. So under the modules here, you have this app service. And as you may see, it's an application service that picks up the location of the resource group and then deploys the app service plan resource and then deploys the application on a free tier so that we don't get some extra charges due to demo. All right, this is what it is. Second, you see that it's actually deploying another resource group, and this time it's deploying the virtual machine. And this virtual machine, of course, it has parameterized username and other things. But the important thing is that if you want to find where it is, you can actually click. Here's another. If you uh, put your finger on control, you will see it will become as a link, and you just click on it. It will navigate you there, which is really awesome in terms of navigations. So you see that this file defines a virtual machine and all its resources, network, storage, everything that you need to have. But the difference of this one is not just your Azure Bicep, but it also comes with the parameters, right? And where are these parameters? I went and created these parameters under a param files folder here. You see there's
Yeah,
7.
El, can I
Yes,
interrupt you for a second? Yeah, we
sure.
are kind of 9 minutes away. There are five questions here waiting
Let's
for
go.
you. Not
Let's
sure if
go
you
with the
do you want
questions.
to tackle them now?
Uh, let's let's do the following. Let me kick off the deployment of this, okay, and then we'll tackle those questions and kind of sum it up. Would
Yeah,
that
go man.
work? Okay,
Yeah, go man.
let's do
Let's do
that.
that.
All
Okay.
right. So here we see a deployment again. I'm going to click on this visualizer, and the reason is that just to show you what's going to be deployed, and you see that there's two resource groups. It's a web app deployment, and there's a my resource group that has a virtual machine and its network deployment. All right, that's pretty cool. Let's do that. Let's do that happening. And to do this, again, you can go to the demo scripts here and go to the deployment for the number 7. It should be somewhere here. Here it is. So we are going to deploy these resources using this last one, where you see that it's actually deploying those virtual machine and web app and using these parameters, right? I define these parameters, and if you look into those parameters, you would say I have some simple values here, okay? And this is for dev environment. You can create another one depending on what type of environment you are deploying, okay? So let me kick off this script, and then we'll go back to the questions. So to kick this last script where we deploy multiple resource groups, and I'm going to say, okay, run this. First, we'll try to have this pre-flight validation. It's very important. And let's see what would be the result. It should go through fine. And once we say yes, okay. All right, so here we go. It says everything is fine. It's going to create 10 resources. As you see here, I'm going just to say yes, deploy that so we can look at the result. Yes. All right, while this thing is getting deployed, let me kind of sum up that I had a also presentation about security resource and how deploy them. And you can, look into my Azure repo, how it was done, what is the script, how you can deploy your Azure policies, definitions, and resource logs. Let me summarize that. We looked here for what is Azure. Before summarizing that, let me actually answer the questions while this deployment is still going, as you see. And while this deployment is going, let me just bring the resource groups here. As you see, I have 13 records now, before it was 11. And here we have these two new resource groups. They are getting deployed. And if I click on one of them, you will see that under deployment, this thing is still rolling. Oh, this is done. If you looked at the other one, this is also done. Oh, cool. So all deployment is done. And what it means that once it is there, you can go to your Azure portal. which is this guy here. Let me bring it just a second. Yep, here's the screen. And this is your app service. So in overview, if you go there, you can actually go into the again into the templates part and visualize that to see what's included into that. It'll take a little bit of time here. Okay, let it come up. While it's loading this, I will load the other one. Okay, still in progress. I hope it wouldn't ask me to log in too much. All right, here it is. So here, if you visualize that, you would see that we have here web app, and we have it's a web app and it's the application service, ASP, application service plan. And for the other resource, if you go there, you would say this is the going to be the resources that you need to deploy for the here it goes. All the components of a virtual machine when you deploy on Azure, including network interfaces, your NSGs, your disk, and everything that's required for that. All right. Okay, that's it. Let me
Yeah, we are
go through
4
the
minutes away
questions.
from the finish.
Okay, let me then finalize this. So we
Okay.
covered all these things that we just spoke about, right? We went what's Azure Bicep, how to get started, what you need to have in place, and then we'll look into a number of demos in terms of getting our feet wet with Azure Bicep language. This is the basic codes. If you wanna scan them, this is the Learn Bicep GitHub repo that I was doing demonstrations from. This is my LinkedIn account, so you can get connected, and I strongly recommend everybody, let's get connected and let me know what tasks are you up to. And then Bicep project, if you want to learn more about that, this is the GitHub repo for that. And of course tutorials, you can look at them here. And this is the questions and answers now. Go ahead, Jackson.
Okay, yeah, there you go. And just to remind everybody, in a few seconds, I will paste the link where everybody can claim a voucher to do an Azure exam or whatever the exam you want. Okay, the first question is, let me just present in here. Yeah, does Bicep offer custom scripting execution?
Yes, basically when you say custom script execution, if you mean like can you bring JSON templates from ARM and execute as a part of it, yes, there is actual provisioning for that. You can do it. But if you are talking about like some Python script or some other stuff, it's not there yet. Would it be there in the future? I don't know, but that's not part of the plan at the moment.
Okay. The next one is interesting enough because we know Azure is such a kind of large, big platform. Does Bicep support every Azure resource available, or are any exception? Does it support Azure AD components?
No, because you have this actual scope to deploy into tenant. Tenant means that there is Azure AD support, and you can actually create your users. You can manage your users using the Azure Bicep language. So it's possible, yes.
Okay, that's
There's
good news.
support
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the next one is interesting as well. Can we convert any ARM template to Bicep file? Do we need any
Yes.
additional tool to do that?
No, you don't need any additional tool. And let me show you an example here. I didn't come there, the conversion. That's a really great question, actually. Thank you for reminding. Yes, here if you look at the demo scripts, one of the demo scripts is talking about decompile. So let me come here. Here it is, right? So what it does basically, let me make it bigger. So yes, in Azure Bicep, you have this decompile where you just point into your ARM template and it's going to make a best kind of, automated conversion of your ARM JSON template into Bicep language code. Sometimes there are errors and squiggly things that you have to clean up on yourself. But out of like 98, 99% of the times when I used it, it worked fine. But there was a number of cleanups if you in terms of renaming the parameters, making sure that everything links. And when you have like multiple resources like virtual machines and networks and stuff like that, you have to understand the configuration there so that when you clean it up, it doesn't you can do it in a nice way that it doesn't mess up the structure.
Okay,
So
yeah, it's
that may
good to
happen.
know.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, there is a way to do that, and that's the example how you can do it. All right. Next
Okay.
one.
Yeah, the next one, in terms of if ARM template can be converted to Bicep files, is there any recommendation or any precaution that we should be aware of?
No, only the thing is that once you did that conversion, go and try to deploy that using this pre-flight validation that I showed couple times. That would be a good starter. And plus, look into the visualizer, see that does all the resources actually exist in your bicep conversion. That would be two things which I would look into.
Mhm. Okay, the next one then is, can we drag and drop the Azure Resources blocks, and the code will be automatically built in the background?
Yeah, I don't know if there is such a feature yet. I didn't see any, but there is a such thing. There are like different tools, and they are mentioned. They are not part of Azure Bicep. They're like this Farmer. There's like different tools. Just let me know on the LinkedIn about that. I will point you to that type of tools. But they are commercial tools. You have to pay for
Mhm.
it. But there, yeah, there's a drag and drop kind of ways how you can provision your Azure resource. Yes, there's such thing.
Okay, and then the
Hmm.
last one at the moment, yeah, very important, I would say as well. How do we make sure Bicep deployment is in compliance with Azure policy? Yeah,
That's a
that's a
good
good one.
question. Yeah,
Good one,
and
yeah.
that's the reason why I say that there is actual demo about that, right? So to do that, you need to define your compliance policies and deploy them before deploying your Azure resource. For example, this deployment policy that I have here says that, okay, whenever you deploy any resource in your Azure environment, make sure that they are located in one of these four allowed locations. So if they are in a different regions and these four, don't let it happen. So in order to make this happen, and of course you can deny or audit that policy. And rule of thumb is that first you'd want to audit that to make sure that whatever you introduce, you don't break things right away. Okay, and then you do the actual. But first, yes, you can enforce that by making sure first you deploy your policies. You need to wait at least like 30 minutes or so to make sure those policies take effect, and then go ahead and deploy your, let's say, while later, let's say you want to deploy something in not in US but like in North Europe, right? Then
Mhm.
that deployment is going to fail because that policies, that definitions will prevent that from happening. Yes, there's a way to do that.
Okay.
And this is the
Uh,
example. Yeah.
yes, the last question is in regards if we are giving away some exam vouchers. Yeah, very good question. Yeah, I want to say before we kind of finish up for today, thanks very much for the brilliant presentation. Uh, yeah, myself, I'm walking away now with a much better understanding of this technology. Really powerful, I would say. And for everybody watching us, let me just paste here the feedback link. If you could take a minute just to fill out a small evaluation for us, it's always good for us to see how much you are learning, if you are enjoying our sessions as well. And please take your time and do that for us. And finally, guys, if you want to claim your exam voucher, it's always nice and very important, I would say, to keep your certification fully, let's say, fully updated. Yeah, there you go. Here is the link. Okay, and thanks so much for Microsoft, our main sponsor, to be doing that for our attendees. And yeah, let me see a few more questions in here. Uh, okay, yeah, there is one more technical question in here, I believe. Yeah, how it is different from Azure Blueprint?
Yes, so Azure Blueprints, when you define them, it's basically not just it has ARM templates in it, correct?
Mm,
And with Azure Blueprints, it's more like not just ARM templates, but you want to define Azure policies, and Azure Blueprints are something that you want to deploy on top of different subscriptions based on different environment to enforce certain policies and to make sure that certain resources are configured in a certain way. So it's Azure Blueprints more of a much higher scope in terms of how to provision and run your different subscriptions in a compliant way, correct? So it's such a much more higher level of doing that. So at this moment, how you can use Azure Blueprints, all those ARM templates, things that you have been including into your Azure Blueprints, you can actually, in order to maintain them, you can generate them as Azure Bicep so that they are more compact, more
Mhm.
cleaner, and more understandable. And then you can generate your ARM templates by using AZ Bicep build. It's going to build you a JSON, representation of your bicep, and you just include them there. That's how they are related.
Okay. One more question. Yeah, that's really great. Our audience is asking lots of questions. Yeah. Would Bicep replace ARM down the line? What's
Yeah,
your kind of opinion if ARM will be gone in a few years, I would say? What do you think?
I would say it's not going to replace completely. Again, it's a transparent abstraction. It's the abstraction on top of Azure ARM and ARM layer in Azure environment, correct? So it's not, ARM templates are not going anywhere. So if you have already in production things that you maintain, keep them there. It's not going to replace. You look at the Azure Bicep language more like a next evolution of
Mhm.
ARM templates to make it easy for newcomers, new starters to start playing with Azure Resource Provisioning and be much more happier and productive with that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all for tonight. Busy night, I would say. Yeah, everybody must be a bit tired now with so much nice, let's
A
say,
lot of,
information. Of course, the
yeah.
next step is always, to keep following us and do some labs as well, and try to do some real implementation. That's always nice to, in terms of learning.
Yes. Thank you, Jackson, for all these questions and everything. Again, I will just remind for the everybody, thank you for attending. It was really a pleasure. Please check my blog post where I'm actually blogging about Azure Bicep, Azure CLI, and new updates that are coming. In addition to that, feel free to get connected with me. These are the social accounts that where you can find me, and reach out to me. I would be happy to help with your challenge and see what type of next thing you are cooking in your backyard for Azure deployments.
Yeah, okay,
That's
that's
all.
great. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Al, for the great presentation one more time. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this last hour, I would say. And please keep in touch, keep checking our LinkedIn page and our page for more session every Wednesday, okay, 6 o'clock. Okay, thanks very much. Stay
Thank
safe.
you,
All the
Jason.
best.
Thank you, Jackson, and thank you, Cloud Lunch and Learn. See you guys.
Okay,
Bye.
great. Yeah, great. Thank
Bye.
you.